Every day, murders go unsolved.
With more than 150 murders last year, and about 4 in 10 remain unsolved.
The families of the victims wait for justice, sometimes for decades, with many perpetrators going on to commit even more brutal murders, and some even dying before seeing jail. However, in recent years, with the use of advanced DNA technology, there has been a glimmer of hope for decades-old cases.
The police department is adopting a new policy to make cold cases a priority. It will require sergeants to review every unsolved homicide every 3 years. Cold cases with the potential to be solved using new DNA technology will be prioritized.
From biological profiling to a killer confessing her heinous crime, here are 3 crazy cold cases that were solved recently. Stephanie Hebert. On July 13, 1978, 5-year-old Stephanie Hebert vanished from her home in Live Oak Floral Acres subdivision. She was going to a neighbor's house 3 doors away, but did not arrive. Her mother, Joyce Hebert, didn't panic when Stephanie was late for dinner at about 5:30 p.m., but she became frantic when she couldn't find her daughter and learned that Stephanie never made it to the neighbor's house for an earlier playdate. Joyce Hebert called the police station and reported her missing, which sparked a massive 3-day search of the family's Live Oak Floral Acres subdivision. More than 150 deputies, reserve officers, firefighters, and residents mobilized to comb the neighborhood and 3.5 square miles of thick brush in the nearby woods. For nearly 6 months, the FBI, psychics, and volunteers aided by helicopters searched unsuccessfully for Hebert. Her parents, Donald and Joyce, pleaded for her safe return at a press conference.
To the person or persons that have our little girl, please take care of her for us. Tell her we love and miss her very much. If you have any love for her, call us to tell us she is all right. We want our daughter back home where she belongs. No matter where you are, please let Stephanie call us. We want so much to hear her voice.
For weeks, the Heberts didn't leave their home, afraid to miss the call that would tell them their daughter had been found alive and well. Despite the search efforts, including a psychic and a $5,000 reward, no one could find Stephanie. On November 29, 1978, the search ended when a hunter found her remains at St. Charles Parish in the Taft area. A rope was wrapped around her skeletal remains where she'd apparently been tied to a tree. Stephanie had been found, but investigators still didn't know who had taken her and left her body alone in the woods. Her glasses, shoes, and clothes were found nearby. Then-teen Roger Alexander, who also lived in the Wagman area, was a prime suspect in the murder. But Alexander passed a polygraph test, and a St. Charles Parish grand jury did not find sufficient evidence to prosecute him in 1980. Then the case went cold. In 2012, Daniel Parks Sr. emerged as a new suspect. Parks was charged with the sexual assault of a then-local 7-year-old child that occurred around the same time as Hebert's disappearance. The child, who was friends with Hebert, told police she confronted Parks about the rape nearly a decade later in 1991 and was told she might end up like Hebert. Brought in for questioning, Parks confessed to the rape and made a comment about Hebert, but later recanted his confession. Because he had diabetes, he maintained he may have incorrectly implicated himself in the crime. He was found guilty of aggravated rape and sentenced to life in prison. But the case doesn't end there. Another suspect, 75-year-old Jason Vendrick Franklin, was also charged with the sexual assault of Hebert, along with 2 other children at the time of Hebert's disappearance. Unbeknownst to the Heberts, Franklin was living on Astor Lane in the late 1970s, just 8 houses away. According to authorities, the former U.S. Army veteran and truck driver had been convicted of attempted rape in 1966. The Cold Case Homicide Squad began to dig into Franklin's possible ties to Stephanie Hebert's death last year. They discovered evidence that he had raped at least 4 children while living in Wagman and Bridge City between 1973 and 1977. While the grand jury charged Franklin with Stephanie's rape, the sheriff's office has not revealed the evidence they believe links him to the girl's death. Anita Knutson. Anita, a tenacious, kind, and compassionate young woman, had just completed her first year at Minot State University, where she was studying elementary education. She had been working 2 jobs to pay for school and was living with her roommate, Nicole Rice, in an off-campus apartment. Her mother, Sharon Knutson, said she last spoke to her daughter Friday, June 1, 2007. The two were in touch daily, so when Anita didn't answer her phone for several days, Sharon asked her husband on June 4th to drive from their home in Butte, North Dakota to Anita's apartment. Gordon Knutson drove about an hour to her apartment in Minot, North Dakota, to make sure she was okay, but when he arrived, it seemed no one was home. Gordon attempted to enter the apartment, but it was locked, so he found the landlady and the maintenance worker to ask for help. The maintenance man recalling seeing a window screen removed and sliced outside of Anita's apartment. When Gordon went to look for the screen, he realized it was from his daughter's bedroom window. He then looked inside and saw his daughter on her bed. Gordon said in a 2016 interview, the mattress was soaked with blood. The landlady let them into the apartment and they called the Minot police. Then he peered into Anita's bedroom window. Anita, face down on her bed, had been stabbed several times. Someone had covered her body in a large housecoat. Investigators noted that Anita's laptop, cell phone, purse, and digital camera were all in her bedroom, indicating her death was not part of a robbery. There were no signs that anyone had entered through Anita's bedroom window where the screen had been taken out. Gordon said, "Her body was cold, so I knew she was dead." Police questioned Anita's friends, neighbors, and construction workers who were on the job nearby. They also found a small pocket knife in the room, which showed traces of DNA on it. The police took blood samples from the people they interviewed and checked them against the DNA. When they interviewed Anita's roommate, Nicole Rice, she said she was with her family the whole weekend. But investigators suspected something was off with Rice's story. Statements given by Rice and her parents were allegedly inconsistent and contradictory. Several friends told police that Anita and Rice often fought and that Anita was scared of her. Klug, the police chief, said investigators never ruled out Rice as a suspect, but they did not have enough evidence to arrest her. The case went unsolved for over 14 years. Investigators learned that Rice was dating a man for a few months in 2008 and 2009. During that period, someone brought up Anita's death while the couple was at a party. Rice got belligerently drunk and told him that she did it. The man later tried to ask Rice about the confession when she was sober, but she allegedly rebuffed the questions in anger. Finally, earlier this year in March, Minot Police Chief announced the arrest of Nicole Rice.
Now, after nearly 15 years of investigating and following up on leads, and the suspect is in custody.
Rice was taken to Ward County Jail and released the next day on a $120,000 bond. The case is still ongoing, with Rice regularly appearing in court. Patricia Barnes. In August 1995, Kitsap County Sheriff's Office deputies and detectives responded to the 1500 block of Peacock Hill Road southeast in Olaya, Washington, after a passerby found a murdered woman in a ditch alongside the road. The homicide victim was identified by her fingerprints as Patricia Lorraine Barnes. She was 61 and a resident of Seattle, who had been last seen by acquaintances days before her discovery in the ditch. Barnes had no known relationship with Kitsap County prior to her death. Barnes was shot twice in the head and found without clothing in a ditch, partially covered by a sleeping bag. The Kitsap County coroner subsequently determined the cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds, and the case was classified as a homicide. The scene where Barnes's body was located was subjected to significant evidence processing and collection. Throughout the course of the investigation, approximately 130 individual evidence items were collected. Kitsap County Sheriff's detectives also conducted an exhaustive amount of follow-up with the assistance of the Seattle Police Department, which was unsuccessful in identifying a suspect in her murder. For some period of time, Barnes was suspected of being another victim of the Spokane serial murderer, later identified as Robert Lee Yates, even though she did not fit the profile of Yates's other victims due to similarities in the killer's methods. After deciding to reopen the case in 2018, detectives reviewed the evidence and photographs from the scene, re-interviewed detectives previously assigned to the case, and sent the physical evidence to Washington State Crime Lab, as well as 2 private forensic laboratories in Texas and Florida for DNA testing. In the first weeks of 2022, one of those private labs, Othram Labs Inc., provided the name of a potential candidate for the DNA that KSCO believed to belong to the suspect. The name was discovered after advanced forensic genealogy processes were completed by the private lab, including searching genealogical databases for genetic relatives to a DNA profile for an unknown suspect. Based on this information, KCSO contacted the Nogales Police Department in Arizona and Pima County Medical Examiner's Office to inquire about the name provided by the lab, and it was determined that the person had died of accidental causes in 2016. On February 7th, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab concluded that the DNA of the subject who died in Arizona was Douglas Keith Crone. Crone was identified as matching the suspect profile in the murder of Barnes. A person believed to be responsible for the murder of Patricia Barnes is Douglas Keith Crone, who had previous addresses in both Seattle and Tacoma. Crone would have been 33 years old at the time of the 1995 murder. Crone had a significant criminal history in Washington, resulting in 5 felony convictions. Do you know of any cold cases you want us to feature in one of our videos? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel for your regular dose of whodunits. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, be cool, be safe, and don't get any crazy ideas.